Welcome, pedalers, to another pedal preservation. It's not your imagination. I'm not lip syncing. I'm doing a dub over on this video due to technical problems. So, up in the rack, we've got another Specialized Rockhopper, the second one of its type. You remember the first one? That was the video where I ended up having to paint the frame and we ran into so many problems. Well, this frame is exactly the same, but I'm not going to paint it. It's winter time in Scotland and I've got nowhere to do it. So we're going to make as best a job as we can. So this was a donation in at the bike library. It just needed a bit more than we would normally turn over at the bike library. So I decided to bring it home. I literally just pumped the tires up and rode it home. The gears didn't work. I had two gears. Basically, I had the front chainring gears. That was the only thing that was working. The forks are seized. The brakes work and the tires did hold air. But that was pretty much it. So in this video, we're going to make it nice and we're going to get it ready for a new owner. If you're new to the channel, what we do here is we take bikes that may not actually see a second life. They're usually abandoned or neglected. And we bring them back to life for another owner. And we do it with the minimal amount possible. We don't like fitting new parts here. Parts already exist in the world. We don't need any more. So, before we even start, to get the bike back from the bike library, it was peeing down with rain. So I thought rather than getting soaked, I would stick one of these duck-billed platypus mud guards on. They are hideous. I hate them. If you're going to have a mud guard on a bike, have a proper one. Do not use one of these. But it was all I had, and I had to whack it on quick. So the first thing I'm doing in this restoration is we're getting rid of that. And of course, as always, you know the script. We get the wheels off first because the wheels will require their own service, even if it's just a courtesy service. Hallelujah. There's now a chain with a split link on it. Normally we have to punch the pin out, but this chain is actually in good order, so I am going to be reusing it. So having a split pin is awesome. We rarely have those. The cables in this bike are actually not bad. The bike was actually serviced about a year ago, the chap told me. But there's still something wrong because the shifting was just completely gummed up and wouldn't work. What I was doing, I was going to keep the cables just to double check. But you know what we're like. We'll probably swap all these out. But to make sure, and to make sure things like the derailleur, that will go into the ultrasonic cleaner. Now here's a weird one. The inserts for the bottle rack have been whipped out. I mean, how you would even get these mounts out, I have no idea. But you can also see evidence of the galvanic corrosion under the paint. That stuff is everywhere. Now we want to get all the components off. We want to get this frame down to bare bones so we can clean it properly. Front derailleur, absolutely fine. You know that is going to go in the ultrasonic cleaner and we're just going to give that a clean. But cosmetic wise, it's fine. Let's get those hideous bar ends off. These things were actually seized on quite tight. Actually, I had to bring in the old GT85 to get them off. What's odd is the bars are actually quite wide bars. So why whoever put bar ends on, I've actually got no idea. They have absolutely no business of being there. And of course, the pain is, of course, when people do put bar ends on, they usually cut the grips down. So the grips are actually a bit smaller and they're going to be difficult to reuse, which is a shame because they're nice, a genuine specialized bar ends. But we managed to get them ripped off on both sides, and we certainly will not be using them again. They'll go straight into the bin. I'm slacking off the shifters and the brake levers now, just so I can do our usual IPA alcohol in under the grip, and then using the pick just to work it around. You don't need much. Its capillary action is insane, and then we can just give that a wiggle and that will just come straight off. Repeating the process, of course, on the other bar end, again in the bin, slackening off the shifters and the brake levers. But of course, to get them off, we'll need to take the grip off. So we'll do the same again with my pick. My go-to, the pick, the wee squirt of IPA in under the grip. Just get the pick just to work it around so it goes right round the grip. And that'll be almost all the way up the grip. And you just have, even the most stubborn ones, you just got to have a quick whisk off. I might reuse these grip, but as you can see, because it had the bar end, someone's actually cut the end of the grip down. So it may be a little bit of a pain to use, but I would like to use them. And also I am literally clean out of fresh grips. I'll need to get some more ordered. I've taken all the brake calipers off. They're actually in good order. They will probably need new pads, but apart from that, they're pretty much okay. Now onto the headset. This, again, the whole bike is, it's not that it's rusty, but it just seems to be tight everywhere. So I'm going to just slacken everything off and get that dropped off, because really what I want to get into is the front forks, because they are troublesome. Remember, they are seized solid, and we're going to have to figure out, is it a lockout problem or is it just the stanchions are seized in place? Unfortunately, to get there, we've got to get all this off, and this is not without its own problems, because this is all dry and corroded. I don't think this bike has been stored outside, but I think it has gotten wet repeatedly, and it has just gone in. But having had that service a wee while back, hopefully we should not have too much of a hard time of it. I'm just picking out the tapered cone, the plastic tapered cone, and that's going to allow us to get the whole, not the stem, the steerer tube dropped down. Now, once we drop it down, you can start to see we've got some evidence of dryness and rust and corrosion. The bearings also are not fantastic. It's just like the grease is just hardened off. Now, I'm looking for the bottom one, but I don't know if you notice, it's actually on top of the steerer tube. I hadn't found it. I was actually convinced the bike had actually been assembled without the bearing in the bottom, which is just hilarious. And then, of course, it drops to the floor, and I have no idea how it got there. I'm just pointing out the rust on the stanchions. I'm going to try and get that off later in the video, but it may be a bit problem. I was hoping that the bike was in better conditions. I would just swap the actual forks out, but I'm not going to do that because the bike is a little bit rough. But to get the stanchions off and get these stripped down and see what's going on, we'll have to loosen off the stanchion bolts. Now, you see, I'm not actually taking them off the whole way, because we have to use the nuts to actually hammer the stanchion shafts up the way. But as normal, if you've seen my other videos, I always end up peeing hydraulic fluid all over the place every time I take a set of forks apart. So I'm going to learn my lesson, and I'm going to take the springs, etc., which there should be springs in here and not oil. But I have taken a set of these, it was J2s that I had last time on the RockShox, and they had oil in them. These are J3s, I'm not quite sure. This is me just hammering the nuts up. So this just unlocks the shaft from the body. And you'll do that, and then you can actually take the actual nuts out of the bottom on both sides. And that'll allow us now, well, with normal effort, you can just grab the two halves, grab the stanchions, grab the fork body, and pull them apart. Now, if they are seized on, nothing to do with the lockout, but seized on because the shafts are stuck, then this is where we have this sort of problem where this is really not wanting to move. And unfortunately, you're going to have to get the big guns in, and the big guns are in the way of a big hammer, and then you just have to smack the bejesus out of it. Don't worry, it will not harm them. But this is usually the bit where if you have got oil in there, it's going to come all peeing out everywhere. So I'm just whapping a little bit of GT84 85 on, as if that'll help, which it does a little bit. And then they soon pop apart, and we didn't really get any oil peeing out. So I was probably rudely convinced that there was no oil in them. But later in the video, you see that we have. Now, one of the stanchion was actually particularly dry, and I think that's the problem why it's stuck. Now, we're coming in with a tin foil trick to get all the corrosion off, etc. And do you know what? I'm always utterly amazed that this actually works, and it does. It's almost like it takes the rust off, and then pitting that is left, you get, it's almost like a small amount of the foil, the aluminium, goes into the pitting. So it colors it, but it's almost like it fills it. Probably completely temporary, but it looks a way better. Now, guys, for the experienced folk out there, please tell me a good way of getting the stanchion seals off. I've always just used this trick with the adjustable spanner. I'm not convinced it's the best way of doing it. Maybe getting an old set out and never using them again, yes. But if you are going to use them, you don't want to damage them. Now, these came off absolutely fine. There's no problems there. Now, this is the bit where I'm trying to get the lockout, and we're going to figure out whether the lockout's the problem. I have already taken off the circlip because I didn't have a circlip tool, and I didn't want you to see my butchery ways of how I actually got that circlip out. I'll need to get a set of circlip pliers. So I'm just taking the actual actuator lever off. So this is what will give you lockout or not, but it is simply just a nut. And this is, I'm going to decide now to take the actual insert off. Fortunately, with RockShox, and it's one thing I've always liked with them, regular tools. No stupid like Fox and Sun Tour. You know, you just got to have special tools, or you got to make your tools. So this is the rebound. And now you can see, yes, there was oil in it. So we've not escaped. This is usually all over the bench. But we're now going to give it a clean up, because what I'm going to do is the stanchion mount, it's just chipped. Now, I know we're not going for concourse in this build, not by a long shot. But you know what? This was just letting it down. And I think for the sake of a little bit of black paint, you know, we're not going proper. We're not going to sand it right down and fill the holes. We're just going to make it black. So that's exactly what we've done. I've IPA'd it, just get it clean so the paint will take to it. I'm just going to quickly mask the stanchions off, mask the steer tube off, and we can just literally, I actually had a can of gloss black left. There was literally nothing in the can. It was the absolute dreg, and it was the only can I had. And I literally just want to just make it black. Literally make the chips black. So when I have this finished painted, you can actually still see the chips, but they're black. And it's just going to take your attention away. I got to be honest, there's that many marks on the frame. This is not the kind of way I normally like to go. I like to kind of put the effort in. I would love, if it wasn't the winter, I would strip that frame and paint it and make it nice, and then go beast mode on the rest of it, like the last Rockhopper we did, the don't paint your frame one. But that's for another video. Now here I'm going to try and clean the bearings, and now normally I would just whack them in the ultrasonic cleaner, but unfortunately my ultrasonic cleaner is out of degreaser. I've actually literally got washing up liquid in there, and it does not cut the mustard. So I'm just trying to use like GT85 and all that to get that old crusty oil. That didn't work. I'm coming in with the PTs, coming in clutch. Normally doesn't let me down with a foaming degreaser. Hey PTs, answer the email I sent you about a collab. You know, we're here. Get in early while the channel's small. And the PTs didn't actually knock it either. It was knocking it slightly, but then the balls were starting to fall out. And that's when I thought, do you know what? Let's just get well, what I decided to do first, I got a little bag. I put all the bits that I wanted to clean in the bag. And this is a thing you can do, by the way. It's a bit of a hack for ultrasonic cleaners. You don't want to bin through your solutions. But I actually used IPA, of course, overfilled the bag, spilt it everywhere. And to be honest, even after it was in the ultrasonic cleaner, it didn't work. I mean, it worked okay, but not brilliant. I'm going to have to replace the bearings. The seals were actually all fine. They cleaned up great. So I'm just fitting the seals back in here. I just used a socket. I have actually got fork seal tools, but I don't have them for stanchions this small. I actually 3D printed my last ones. I'll need to actually do some more. The bottom bracket is absolutely A1 sweet. It does not, and it's not, I'm not going to take it off. But just to get in and give the crankset a good clean, hand clean, it won't be an ultrasonic cleaner, and give the frame around that area a really good clean. Because it's amazing, even if your frame is full of chips and all sorts of stuff, clean it. It'll look 10 times better. Get the stickers off it and clean it. So I'm now coming in to do exactly that. Now, you know my go-to, it's muck off. It's 4:1 dilution. We just spray it on. You should really leave it on for as long as you can. Just let it cut in. But actually, the dirt that was on it was actually the dirt that I put on it when I was riding it home from the bike library, because it was a little bit, it was starting to rain and stuff. And it's winter now in Scotland, and there's just lots of like dead leaves and that lying around. So we just come in, clutch with my muck off microfiber cloth. You know I love these cloths. They're not cheap. You do get them on deals. It's worth keeping an eye on the Muck Off website, but they are so plush and you can wash them and wash them and they just keep coming back. I've got about maybe 8 of them and I just cycle them. So you get them all washed. Wife loves that. My old microfiber, oily microfibers in the washing machine. Now I'm just pointing out the corrosion that I was talking about. This is a close up and it's actually very, see this whole area here? That has the galvanic corrosion. That is all under the paint. And the only way you can deal with that is to literally sand out the metal. It's a huge amount of work. So I'm going to take the RockShox sticker off. I just find personalized stickers. It's fun for yourself, but if you've actually got a bike that's going to a new owner, they kind of want it back to the way that it was. I'm not saying stock, but certainly no personalized stickers on it, etc. So I'm just going to do the usual. I heat gun it, and we just slowly peel it off. You'd actually better just heat gunning it in general and then take it off. But you can see again, see the galvanic corrosion? It's under that sticker. There's no chips there, and it's under the sticker. And you see the paint just comes off. And the paint is so thin. I don't know what Specialized did. There was just a period of time they went through where they just literally must have went, oh, here's a frame, give it a quick blot of some paint, it will be good. And it wasn't. So Crankset time, and we are coming back in clutch with the PTs foaming degreaser. I do love this stuff because, to be honest with you, even when the degreaser runs out, you know what you do? You actually keep the spray can because it is a foaming nozzle that's on it, and you just put your own degreaser in and it works fine. But I've actually still got, there's a little bit. This has literally ran out, and that's kind of when I reached out to PTs. I sent them an email, says, hey guys, do me a favor, I'm new, send me a care package. You know I use your products already. Just, you know, just a few cans of stuff, keep me going, support the channel, I'll give you a shout out. And I got nothing. It's been about 5 days and I've not had even a response. I got a support ticket response. Thank you for your opening a support ticket. And then absolutely nothing after that. I'm actually a little bit disappointed. I did actually speak to PTs at the World Cup in Fort William a couple of years ago. Told them what I was going to be doing and all that, and he seemed responsive, but now we're just getting nothing. Maybe my email's been forwarded to another department. Look how these cranks have turned up. I am actually in love with this color. I wish I could get that in a can. I will start painting all my cranks that color. It's like a bluey gunmetal color. Absolutely beautiful. Now the pedals, I like them, and I like them red. The only thing is they are more chipped to hell than I would actually like for this bike build. And I have left over from the forks from the last Rockhopper build where we did repaint the forks. I have some red paint. So I'm just going to give them a blow over. I have not sanded the scratches down or anything. I'm literally going to mask off and I'm going to paint them red and make all the scratches red. It's just, as I say, it's just to take your eye off. Think of, if you're from the UK, you'll know who Arthur Daly is. Well, if you're from the UK and you're older, you'll know who Arthur Daly is. So it's kind of like that. We just want to make it nice for whoever gets it next. They'll probably trash the bike. So you know what? Let's just get a nice wee coat of paint on, make them red again, and we can get them back on the bike looking sweet. These are actually decent pedals, by the way. They're DMR bike pedals. The only downside is they're a little bit... they're not overly broad, but there you go. Just coming in for another wee second coat onto the other pedal, but absolutely spot on. They actually came out really well now that they've dried. I've had to give it a few days because obviously painting the forks and then painting the pedals, I want that paint to be absolutely hard before I put them back on the bike. But as you see, coming in clutch. Obviously not going for full concourse, but it's taken that scratchiness away from the outside of the pedals. So we get the little plastic bungs back in. We've got some nice little metal trims to go back on as well. These are actually quite good quality pedals. They're DMR pedals. So, I mean, obviously they're older ones and they're probably a wee bit small for my liking, but for like a young shredder or something, or just cruising up and down to school or something like that, it's going to be absolutely fine. Now we can get into the rear derailleur. Now, these are upgrades. The old derailleurs did not come with these pulleys. So, well, they're certainly not, I've never seen a set of pulleys like these. So I'm assuming that these are upgrades because they've got huge bearings in them. They're a little bit dry, so we're going to get in there, pick out the shields, etc. And we're going to get some fresh grease into there just to make them spin a bit smoother. There's a couple of schools of thought whether you actually use oil to lubricate them or whether you're going to use grease to lubricate them. I tend to go for the grease option because my thinking is that they'll probably won't get maintained very often. So grease is great at keeping out the any moisture, etc., and keeping the corrosion down to a minimum. Oil definitely is going to be better for not causing any drag. Like when I've finished doing this and I put it in between my fingers and give it a little spin whenever you maintain pulley wheels in your derailleurs, I always find that little satisfying drag, because the drag means it's now being maintained and all that grease is coming around all the balls, etc. So I do prefer, but I have had people leaving comments saying that they prefer to oil them. And don't get me wrong, if you're into road biking or something, that would be the way to go. And if you're disciplined to do it often as well. Now I'm going to start working on the other pulley wheel. Unfortunately, on the other one, maybe this bike hasn't been maintained or had oil in there originally, because sadly this pulley wheel is a little bit seized. It's kind of locked up a bit. It's got a small amount of movement, but not enough. And it's not just old grease in there. It does feel, I don't know, like there's corrosion in there that's now sort of taking part. And there's a little bit of a wiggle room, but there's not really an awful lot. They just don't feel right. And I didn't want to start thinking about working on the pulley wheels, although we've got one done. So I decided just to put them in a cup, put some GT85 on top, and I think I'm going to come back to them at a later date. So that I can push on with the video though, I'm going to take the pulley wheels off another derailleur that I had. In fact, I'd actually already serviced this derailleur, so it actually has grease in it. But it is a standard type of pulley wheel, so there's no bearings, they're just bushings. There is another school of thought that you're not going to have the issues with bearings seizing up. So if you are not into maintaining your bike, sometimes actually getting lower spec components is actually the way to go. That's certainly my thinking. So I'm going to put some standard pulley wheels in this. This is obviously not what the bike would have had, although these pulley wheels are an upgrade. They're in fact an upgrade beyond the bearinged pulley wheels that would already have been in there. So we're kind of downgrading it. It is a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. This bike actually, the spec of it's actually quite good. So it's a shame to downgrade the pulley wheels, but we need to get the video moving because easily things stall out and I never get the videos. I'm trying to do weekly videos, but it doesn't always happen. As we had the components in an ultrasonic cleaner, I'm now just coming in with some oil. I think this is 3-in-1 oil that I typically use, nothing special. I just get that on all the screws, nuts, bolts, pulleys, because it's going to provide a little bit of anti-corrosion, but obviously it's going to work its way into all the pivots, etc. And it's going to just be smoother, because at the moment, anything that was in there was stripped out by the ultrasonic cleaner, because we had detergents, we had heats, we had the vibration. So that's all that now moving nice. The derailleur is actually in good condition. Now, putting the bike back together, we're coming in with the rear derailleur. Remember, you're screwing into a aluminium hanger here. So if you feel any resistance here, stop, back it up and try it again. Because you can easily cross-thread these. And if you do manage to get it in cross-threaded, it ain't going to work very well. The bottom bracket was absolutely A1, so we're just going to come back in, bit of grease on the axle, and then we can get the crankset back on. I would absolutely love this crankset. Don't know why, just love the aesthetic of it, and I love that sort of metallic-y pale blue color as well. So we're just going to tighten up with Allen key, get those cranks onto the bottom bracket all nice and tight and snug. I give it a spin, it's absolutely running smooth and true. Now moving on to the front derailleur. Now the derailleur had left marks on the frame already, so I assumed it was actually in the proper position, but actually when we come to put the chain on, there was actually a little bit of chain rub, so I will be readdressing that. Now remember, we painted the forks and I did leave these for a few days. I did not want this to all chip off when I started putting them back on, because you're still roughing and toughing, because remember, we haven't actually serviced them yet. We've got the seals back in. I've got a little bit of SRAM butter. This stuff is crazy expensive, and I'm actually going through quite a lot of it doing these bikes. This is probably overkill for these forks, because ideally what you do is you fill up, there's like a groove in the seal, and you want to get that completely filled with the grease. But I was trying not to keep using it all up, because I don't want to have to keep replacing it while servicing on these older bikes. As you can see, we have actually spilt a bit of oil. Happens to me every time. I'm just putting a little bit of that oil onto the rebound cartridge, so I can it just gets that seal a bit slippy, so I can whack it back down into the fork. As I said before, love the RockShox. They use standard tools, so I'm just coming in clutch with a standard socket set, and you can just crank that thing down, no bother at all. It's a great thing about RockShox. I love it. Fox, not so much. Even SR Sun Tour, you need some special tools to take things apart. But with the old RockShox, you don't. I have a mix of Fox and is it Sun Tour? No, actually, I have RockShox as well. What am I thinking? On my e-bike, I actually have RockShox forks. Now, the bolts need to go into the bottom here, but you have to have the shafts inside pushed against the top of that hole, so the bolt can go inside and then pick it up. And it was that point I realized that I had not pushed the shafts down. So I'm now coming in, I'm topping up the oil, because we actually have had a little spill. So I came in with an extension rod, pushed that shaft back down. Now I'm putting all the various parts back on, and then now we can pop these screws in, because the aluminium shafts will be just under here, and you need to catch those to bring them up, and then you can actually tighten them up again, and that's what we're wanting to do. We're putting the lockout control back on. I was hoping that, because you can't take this apart, it's a sealed cartridge, I was hoping once I stripped it down, etc., that it would start working again. But you can see here, I'm pushing on it, I'm then locking down, and it's making no difference. Now, it could possibly be that the cartridge has to refill with oil again, so that might be something that might pop into life later on. Now we can get the forks back on the bike. So I've got the bearings, the cups have all been, I did clean them out, but I meant to replace the bearings for new ones, and then I forgot I was going to do that, and I've re-greased the old ones thinking they will be fine, and to be honest, 9 times out of 10 they are. So I'm just putting all your diff area spacers on. I have opted to change the stem to a proper Specialized one. The original one was really short, and it just looked cheap. It's like it didn't belong on the bike. It may not be an original feature. So I had the spare Specialized stem off another bike. So I'm going to put that on it. It will lengthen. It's a slightly longer stem. So if you're a taller rider, this would actually work to your benefit. And I am a slightly taller rider for this bike, so actually this would work out quite well, especially if you're going to be using it properly. So we can get all the things tightened down. I tend to over tighten here just to get everything to bed in, and then I back it off. Now, when I do it, I'm twirling the forks here and it's making noises. It just doesn't feel great. So what I've done, I stripped the whole thing back off again. I've come in with my Dremel multi-tool. I have polished the cup, etc., to get that smooth. I'm coming in with some new bearings, getting some nice speed grease in there, etc., and we can get that all plonked back in. It will not make it like new, because I'd have to replace the cups, and I'm not going to do that. I did not have any. And remember this, the whole point of the channel is about utilizing what we have, servicing, restoring, bringing back to life bikes at a minimal cost. And all too often, no cost, you know? So that's what the channel's all about. Don't get me wrong, if this is your only bike and you're servicing it to go another 5 years without work, yes, replace these bits. But we're not doing that. We're trying to get it back out there. This bike will be going back down to the library. It'll be sold for a nominal cost. So, you know, we can't go throwing loads and loads of money at stuff. We do what's needed to be done, but we can't go crazy. This is not our personal bike. At the end of the day, things have got to pay for themselves. I'm just pointing out here, I'm going to remove the old cables from the shifters. So in these particular ones, you have these little screw caps that you unscrew. They always stick to the screwdriver. You never seem to lose them, but you often forget to put them back in. Just remember to shift down to the bottom gear so the holes line up, and then those cables can pop out. We'll put the new cables back in when we actually fit them. Now, the brakes are full hydraulic. Awesome. This is definitely an upgrade, I think. I hadn't come across these pads before. They're very unusual looking. They've also got the split pin at one end, and then they have the hook on the other. What is unusual, you can actually pop these pads actually into the brakes without even taking your wheels off. Certainly all my other hydraulic brakes, I've had to take the wheels off. We're just going to give it a clean. We're not stripping pistons out or anything. We're just going to give it a good clean. GT85 as always. Using my little bottle brush in there just to clean all the dirt out. And then we just finish off with our Muck Off Super Plush microfiber cloth. I absolutely recommend these. Now, there's no requirement for brake bleeding, etc. These brakes, because as I remember, I did cycle this bike home from the bike library and everything was absolutely A1, no problems at all. But, you know, we're just going to give them a service. Coming in to do this will probably be the front brake now. I've removed these brakes with the adjuster, not the adjusters, the adapters on. The idea is that I can put them back without having to adjust, but that never happens. Every time I do it, I've got to slacken the actual brake caliper off where it mounts onto the adapter to make adjustments. I don't know why it is. Things shouldn't move when you take it off per the adapter. Back in with the microfiber cloth. The GT5 just gives the black parts a wee sort of lush look about them. Just refreshes them. I mean, it's not going to fill in scratches and stuff, but it does help cleaning. And again, coming in, this just works its way into all the pivots, and then we can just give it another wipe down. And they're looking spot on. They're all ready to go back on the bike. Here we're coming in, sorry about the focus, coming in with, I like the way that these go on. See how they tuck into each other? I just think that's great. These grips, I rescued them, I can't remember from where. It was a bike that was actually going to scrap at the library. They had these great red grips on it, so I grabbed them, put them on. Absolutely brilliant, I love them. They're actually very soft and plush. Coming back in with the front, now obviously with the front brake caliper. So we're just going to mount this on. As I say, I'm still in delusion that I'm not going to have to adjust this caliper, but ultimately I do have to do it. It's not a big problem, but it's just another step that you have to do. Now coming in on the rear, again, just tightening up the screws straight onto the adapters. But once again, same with the front. I had to actually slacken them off. Now, I love these little clips. I know that you end up using tie wraps for these, but these little clips are just so much neater. Unfortunately, I only had two. So there is one that ended up with a cable tie, sadly. I'll need to find some more or order some more. Bike's really starting to come together now. It's, as I say, there's nothing we can do about the corrosion, but the frame is now clean. One of the best maintenances you can do is just flipping clean your frame. Now the wheels, now not really any problems with the wheels, but you can see these are super dry. This bike, I don't know that if it's been left outside, I don't think, possibly left in a cupboard, not a cupboard, outside storage, which has been quite damp. Now this axle was actually slightly loose, and the only way we're going to be able to adjust it properly is we're going to have to take the cassette off. I mean, I normally take the cassettes off anyway for cleaning, but this didn't actually need it cleaned, but I did have to take it off. It is super stuck. The usual methods are not working. I'm coming in with an impact driver, and then finally I have to come in with my power bar. I, in fact, ended up using a long chain whip for this on the floor, and eventually I got it loosened off. So I'm just using my actual Halfers toolkit just to get the... I don't know what you call that bit, the bit that holds the cassette on. Just had to get that off. It's in great condition, I have to say. This, probably the drivetrain was cleaned in its last service that was done a year ago, albeit maybe some other bits weren't done, but I think the drivetrain was definitely cleaned. So, as always, I'm going to give the spline a clean. I'm coming in clutch with my PT's cleaning brush there, and I obviously had my PT's degreaser. Now a bit of GT85. This is just to get things loosened off and clean the threads. so that the screws on the axles can, well, basically come off. Now, I tell you what, there was a serious amount of washers and grommets and all sorts just to keep this, just to keep the bearings clean. It was crazy. But obviously, the grease still mixes with all the dirt, and we now have to toothpick it all back basically out. Now, I had this crazy idea that I was going to come in with my airline and blow it all out. And in fact, it did blow out straight back into my face. I was just covered in crap. So not the best of ideas to use an airline to clean it out. Now I'm just slacking it off from the other side because the loose side, this was actually slightly loose, but it was loose on the the cassette side. Lost my words. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm now cleaning the thread because this nut was not wanting to come off. So what I'm doing now is I'm taking all the parts off the easy to access side, moving the cone right to the end, and then we can flip it round, and then we can actually tidy up the this side where the cassette goes on. So we've got it all clean, and now we're packing in some speed grease. This is the good stuff. And as always, I rotate the cone when you're putting it in, because that stops what I've just done here, where all that just squidges out. Because when you rotate the cone, it rolls all the balls and drags all the grease back in. We're getting all the seals back on. I mean, it's a Derailleur hub. It's actually a decent hub, and this is probably why it's got all this stuff on it. But then once we got it all in, we actually need to tighten it up. I hadn't actually tightened it up yet. So we're going to lock it up on this side, because when we push it back through, so you'll see me screwing it back in. When I screw it all back in, remember that we can't access the nut then. The lock nut cannot be accessed. So once that's done, we've screwed in back the other side. We're putting the washer on. We're now putting the lock nut in, and we can get that tightened up. And then we can check for play between if there's any looseness in the hub. That's what I'm checking for now. I typically do these up tight so there is roughness. And then I come in with a wee courtesy tighten, and then we can try it again. And if it's all feeling good, then obviously we can nick it up properly. If it's not feeling good, then we might have to make some more adjustments. Now, obviously for the cassette to go back on, we want the next guy that does this, most likely it won't be me, to be able to get it off. So we're coming in and we're putting a bit of grease on there just to stop any moisture again coming in here and causing problems. Coming in with my Halfords tool there. As I say, if you ever get a cheap toolkit and then you get a decent one, don't throw your old stuff out, because there's always going to be handy stuff in it. Always remember the amount of times I've used bits from my Halfords toolkit. Now we're coming in, we're doing the front wheel now. It's slightly different because we're actually using two cone spanners, not a cone spanner and a 17mm wrench. Just putting a little bit of GT85 on, so when we unscrew that outer nut, it will actually come off the threads. So it's exactly the same as the rear hub. We're just going to take the nut off, back off the cone till we've got access, and then we can get the grease in. Again, coming in with the little precision grease gun there. This is actually a Halfords one. We have Halfords close by, so I use a lot of their stuff. And then see, I'm rotating the cone and the grease gets sucked in. And then once you're done, that will go in and you'll get minimal, well, more grease stays inside. And that is that is what we're aiming for. Now we've just opened it up. We're re-greasing back on the other side. Again, rotate the cone. You want to rotate that cone because it gets the balls going round, and then the grease goes round the balls and then goes back in. So once again, I'm going to just tighten this up. Just do the wee courtesy grease. You just have a wee play with it. Does it feel good? It does. Then nick it off. Now we're just coming in. We're just putting the rubber. Fortunately, on the back wheel, I didn't film me putting the grommet back on because it was wrecked. Fortunately, I had a spare one. The good thing is, front, they're absolutely fine. So I'll just give them a little bit of a save with some GT85. Now the skewer had a little bit of surface corrosion on it, so I've used my Scotch-Brite pad. You can use anything, bit of steel wool, whatever, and give it a wee rub to remove that rust. Now I've given the skewer lever a little bit of oil, and then we've put some grease on the shaft, which will stop what we have just discovered with all that corrosion. Now round to the back of the bike, we get the pads in. I hadn't actually come across these type of pads before. They were a little bit unusual, so I didn't have any in my stock, so I'm reutilizing the originals, which were absolutely fine. I gave them a clean and a wee sand and decontamination. So finally, we can start putting things like wheels on and make it look like a bike again. Now, this is where I discovered, obviously, that the brakes will need adjustment. The calipers will need adjusting on the adapters. Nothing we can do about it. So we just slacken them off, you pull the brakes on, and then you just tighten them up slightly. So we just, see, we're going to just whack the brakes on and then tighten them up slightly, and then you can retighten the calipers. Now moving on to the drivetrain, and obviously the original chain was actually pretty spot on. So we put that through the ultrasonic cleaner, and now we can just run it round through all the pulleys, etc. Fortunately, it had a quick link, so there was a bonus. So we just get the quick link back on. Great thing is we don't have to adjust chain lengths or anything like that. This just goes straight back on. Now, of course, so we can actually adjust the derailleur, we need to put all the cables in. This is obviously the shifter cable coming in. We're just lubricating the guides under the, I would say you could call it the crankcase, but the bottom bracket shell. There's a plastic guide, so don't forget to lubricate that, because the cable does go through quite a tight turn there. And we're just going to put that through the outer, just before the derailleur. You can hook that into the frame and then just pop it into the derailleur adjuster. All important. Just make sure it's all nice and free. I'm just oiling the actual adjuster, because these are commonly quite tight, especially if they haven't been looked after. I'm just giving this a wiggle with the pliers. I'm not going crazy. We're not damaging the actual adjuster. Even with all that done, this adjuster was still tight. The reason was the cable outer, the ferrule on the end, was quite tight in the metal part of the adjuster. So when I was trying to turn the adjuster, rather than the ferrule on the end of the cable turning, slipping around inside the adjuster, it was trying to turn the whole cable, which was a bit of a pain. So we struggle with that later on. Now coming in for the front derailleur cable. This one comes up from below, over the top of the derailleur, and then down to the adjuster. Bit of a journey, but they seem to work very well, so just watch out for that. If you put your derailleur, if you take it straight to the attachment point in the derailleur, it ain't going to work. I'm just giving it a quick try, because the chain is round, so that's obviously going to stop it. Now, so that we can actually turn the cranks, we need to put the pedals on. So finally, our nice red pedals are coming in. Fortunately, they're decent pedals, so they go on with an Allen key rather than the spanner, which just makes it a little bit easier. And now we can give it a little bit of a rub. Now, there's this point where I start realizing actually is rubbing just here. The chain is hitting the derailleur guide. The derailleur is in fact slightly too high. So the marks that were on the frame were maybe from a different derailleur. So I had to drop that down. Once I did that, everything was running quite slick. Now I'm trying to shift up at this point, but it's not quite shifting up properly. The main reason is we just need a bit more tension in the cable. And this is where I'm struggling with this adapter, because that ferrule is just too tight. So what I decided to do is to actually adjust it up on the shifter itself. So you just want to just keep turning till you get that first gear in, and then you can slowly work your way up through the gears and just adjusting as you need to, so you've just got the right amount of tension. Too much tension, it's going to change up too quickly or change up 2 gears, or in fact it won't change back down again. So once you get the tension just right, you can just slowly, as you see, I'm just working my way up the gears slowly, go to the top, make sure it's not over shifting, because then we'll require some extra adjustments, and then we go back down again. And now moving to the front derailleur, what we need to do is we need to, using these adjustment screw, is we need to adjust the wee gap. So there's a small, I can't remember if there was a gap or it was actually touching the chain at this point. So I'm going in, I'm tightening it up. So obviously there's a bit of a gap and I want to close that gap. But remember, if you are adjusting this, if you've got this in the bottom sprocket on the front, you need to be on the biggest sprocket at the back to make this adjustment correctly. And we want to adjust this till it's just before it's actually touching that chain. And that sets the base point of the front derailleur. You might even find that you might have to go back and adjust the cable afterwards. But I'm finding it's changing up quite nicely. The gears are working. We're not getting the rub. But just remember that you can't be in the top sprocket on the front and then the biggest sprocket at the back. And then it will hit because you're cross-chaining. And that is not how you're going to ride. So remember, you're not going to get perfect chain through the front derailleur guide through every sprocket on the front. You've got to remember you need to work both front and back. What I like to do is get it working on, if it's on the smallest sprocket on the front, you can go up and down the gears at the back because that's the most common scenario. Now, obviously, I'm coming in to clean the wheels because the wheels are easier to clean on the bike. Now, these were particularly dirty wheels, albeit not corroded or anything. So that's why during the build, I never actually cleaned them. I cleaned the hub, but I left the rims and the spokes. So I'm coming in with my oiliest rag that I've got. So ideally, after this kind of cleaning all the spokes, etc., I actually come back with a dry rag because it was literally dripping off the spokes. Just all the oil and cleaner that's been building up over the months. I need to give it a wee clean. Now, remember the wee holes we had in? Corrosion, we can't do anything about it, but the holes at least we can fix because I don't have the tool that puts the inserts into the frame. So that's something that a future person can do. Now, what do you think, guys? This bike came out absolutely rocking in the end. I feel we did it justice. We spent literally no money. I mean, cables, that was it. And we saved this thing because remember, the gears didn't work. The forks were, the front forks were locked up. We got them loosened off, albeit we don't have a lockout anymore. But yeah, this came out great. Minimal amount of effort, a little bit of paint here and there. And I think we did a great job. So I'll be taking this back down to the library. I'll be riding it down and we'll be passing this on to a new home. Either it'll be donated or sold at a very affordable price. Please like and subscribe and support my channel. And I will see you on the next video, whatever that may be. I don't know what it is. Bye.